right, so once again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for the Spring 2023 SciPol Scholars Day. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leanna Kalinowski. I am the current SciPol Scholars Coordinator here at the National Science Policy Network. I'm super excited to be guiding us tonight through a fun platter of events today. So I first wanted to start by giving a quick overview of the SciPol Scholars Program. And this program, really the goal of it is to provide early career scientists ranging from undergrad, grad students, postdocs, even people in their first careers with hands-on experience in science policy. This program consists of two components. The first component is a 6-week policy writing and communication bootcamp that is facilitated by NSPN, otherwise yours truly. And the second component of the program is a 6-month part-time internship that is with an external science policy organization of the scholar's choosing. Alumni of this program have traditionally been successful in landing science policy fellowships, such as the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, as well as directly entering the workforce in science policy with full-time positions. So it's a really exciting and useful program in the science policy space. So if you go through this event tonight thinking, wow, that's really fun, I want to do that in the fall or next spring. Good news for you, we are always recruiting for this program twice a year, once for our May bootcamp and once for the October bootcamp. So if you're interested and want to learn more, I encourage you to check out our program website at scipolnetwork.org/SPSR. So tonight we're going to be hearing from participants of both components of the program. Starting off, we'll hear from two scholars who have recently completed the internship phase of their programs with very exciting host organizations. So I'm super excited to hear from them. And then we will pivot quite significantly towards celebrating the class of 2023 bootcamp completers, and they will be participating in the first ever SciPol Scholars Policy Pitch Competition, which I'll be providing more information on that once we get to that part of the programming. Again, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's program. And without further ado, let's dive into our first presentations of the night. So first up, I am very delighted to introduce Dr. Emily Geest, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow in ecology at the Oklahoma City Zoo. Emily was a participant in our fall 2021 SciPol Scholars Bootcamp and recently finished up her internships with the Xerces Society last fall. Emily is joining us from a fire drill in her car, which is incredible. And I'm going to mute myself and let her take it away from here.
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Because it's also 94 degrees outside, so I have to have the AC blasting in my face. But yeah, so I don't have a presentation. It's on my computer in the building that they did a surprise fire drill on and sent us outside for. And it's still going, just looking over there. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what I did. So my background is I am a pollinator ecologist. I specialize in butterflies. And so I knew right away when I finished the boot camp that I wanted to do something with an insect organization. Or an ecology organization, and my dream organization was the Xerces Society. I've been kind of like skirting the organization for years. I've had members on my committee for my master's thesis and my dissertation, but I was like never able to like get in and really do anything with them. So I used this opportunity to just reach out and say, hey, you know, I'm available. I can do something if you guys are interested. They loved the idea. And so then we spent a few weeks just working on what is a good insect themed either advocacy or policy project I could work on. And we settled on creating a endangered species petition for the mysterious lantern firefly. And I had never worked with fireflies before. I mean, luckily insects kind of have very similar ecology, but it was really cool to just learn a whole new group of insects entirely, learn how to read the Endangered Species Act and what all that legalese means, and then just write a 44-page petition and learn how you get it submitted through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, get it submitted to the governors of Delaware and Maryland. And it was officially submitted to those places just in March of this year. So it took a little while. There was a lot of internal peer review. But it's officially out there. And so now we get to see what happens. There's a long, lengthy process with endangered species petitions. Each of the states that was petitioned has to send a 90-day finding, which we're getting pretty close to. So we should probably hear from that in a few weeks. And even though I'm no longer working with this project anymore, I'm still like on it. So I'm still going to be part of anything that comes in the future and helping just understand where it goes. But it was really exciting and a chance to get this little insect that is pretty, it's really small. It's endemic to just these few swamps in Maryland and Delaware. And it's at really high risk of its habitat being lost due to climate change because it's in really low floodplains. So I'm really excited to just have this opportunity to try to help this insect out by just learning how to write a petition. And now I can take that with me. And I work at a zoo now where I work with animals from all over the world that are different levels of threatened. So now I can keep using those skills. So it was just a really awesome opportunity.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Emily. Everyone give up your emoji round of applause. I know that that was something that you were really interested in, so I'm really glad to see that you managed to make it work with them. As our emoji rounds of applause begin to fade away, I am going to introduce our second residency speaker. Really excited to introduce Lauren Wagner, who is currently completing her PhD in neuroscience at UCLA. She was a participant in the Spring 2022 SciPol Scholars Bootcamp and recently finished up her internship with the Meridian International Center this past winter. So thank you for joining us, Lauren, and I'll turn it away to you.
Thanks, Leanna. So I do have some slides. Would you mind enabling screen sharing?
Ooh, is that not allowed? I can make you a co-host. What? There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And thanks for the invite. I'm really excited to tell everyone about my internship. Okay, yeah. Here's my slides. So first, hi, I'm Lauren. As Leanna said, I'm a PhD student at UCLA studying neuroscience, and I was part of the Spring 2022 cohort. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I really enjoyed being a part of the SciPol Scholars program, and I think it was a really amazing jumping off point in terms of like an opportunity to both like kind of get the lay of the land of science policy and also have an opportunity to really get my feet wet with a science policy experience that was more hands-on, which is pretty hard to come by without an official boost. So I guess before I go into the actual residency, I wanted to go over like how useful the memo writing exercise is that you do as part of SciPol Scholars. When I was doing the program, we had the theme of climate change in society, and I've always been super interested in science diplomacy. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do something about global climate change. And I wrote a memo about how seawater rise is, affecting international oceanic boundaries. And it was just a 2-pager memo as required by the SciPol Scholars program. But after writing it, I was like, I think there's a really interesting idea here. I kind of want to build it out. And I recruited a couple fellow NSPN members to help me kind of flesh it out into a full memo. And we submitted it to the Journal of Science Policy and Governance and ended up winning first place in their memo competition on science diplomacy. So I really highly encourage you all to keep going with your ideas. It's a great opportunity to really like gain policy writing experience to keep building on the ideas that you've developed. And you can go into interesting places with them. So yeah, after doing the boot camp, the great thing about SciPol Scholars is you can really decide anywhere to go next. Anywhere from, if you're lucky, you could probably get into a government office, if they accept you, a nonprofit, a corporate think tank or something like that. So there's really a wide array of places you could go. As I said earlier, was really interested in diplomacy. And I had already been working with the Science Diplomacy Committee on developing the Meridian Diplomatic Skills course. So I already kind of knew someone at the Meridian International Center in DC, and had the privilege to attend the Meridian Diplomacy Forum in April 2022, which was focused on science diplomacy. Luckily, that was their theme of that year. This is an annual event that they do, and they were focusing on Arctic, ocean, and space diplomacy. So after that, I was sold. I really wanted to do my residency at the Meridian International Center. And so I did that from October 2022 to March 2023. And my goal was really to just learn how a diplomacy nonprofit works, because Meridian, for those who are unfamiliar with it, is kind of the premier diplomacy nonprofit in Washington. They were founded like 60 years ago, and their whole thing is to promote diplomacy, relationship building, and collaboration across sectors and cultures. And they do that by hosting diplomatic convenings and forums and various educational programs like the one that they have developed with NSPN, as well as cultural exchange programs. And so, yeah, my residency lasted 6 months. And one interesting thing about my residency in particular is that I didn't really have an overarching project. I mainly just wanted to learn how this kind of organization works. So I kind of helped to continue the relationship that NSPN had with Meridian, and also had a series of mini projects and sometimes smaller tasks that I would help with. So I really got to know like kind of the day-to-day projects that they were doing, and got the chance to help out with them. So I just want to like briefly mention some of the projects that I had and projects that you could have as well if you do your residency somewhere similar. So project number one for me was to continue helping out with the diplomatic skills course that NSPN and Meridian piloted last summer, which is happening again this summer. Super exciting. I analyzed some survey data based on how that pilot course went and presented a report on like how to improve the course, some of which are being implemented this coming year, which is really exciting. I drafted a statement of work, which was basically like kind of a formal contract that helps define the roles of each organization in a collaboration. So it's kind of this contracty document that helps kind of formalize the Meridian NSPN relationship a bit. Project number two was I actually created and moderated a LinkedIn group for a while. Meridian has this program that they run called Diplomacy Rise, which is meant to help alumni of their programs and early career diplomacy and global affairs enthusiasts kind of get connected with each other. So anyone here is also welcome to join, because if you're interested in diplomacy, you fall under this category. So that's the link for this LinkedIn group. But basically, I was like the moderator on this group. So that was something that they asked me to do to kind of like foster a community around young people interested in global affairs. I also did some research on diplomacy simulations. And this was because Meridian wanted to kind of build out their educational tools, and they were curious what diplomacy simulations are out there. And so I did a deep dive over a couple of weeks into all of the different like informational packages out there that have to do with diplomacy simulations. There's a lot of resources out there. So I kind of spent time compiling them into a package and then presenting them to Meridian so that they can then use them in the future. I also got to do some ad hoc event support. So for example, creating a guest list for a reception they were holding, writing panelist questions for a diplomacy workshop, and things like that. Towards the end of my residency, they started to begin this idea of holding an AI seminar series, the purpose of which was to help connect diplomats, congressional staff, and tech leaders together so that they're aware of one another, and also train them in like the state of the art of artificial intelligence and its policy implications, because I think we all agree that's a big problem right now. We don't really know how to regulate AI yet. So they're kind of trying to promote this understanding around AI policy and diplomacy globally. So their idea is to address this with a seminar series where they can train policymakers and diplomats and connect them with tech leaders to kind of equip them with the tools to legislate on AI. So I was able to draft this concept paper that would help them kind of seek funding for this program, because it was a brand new idea. And if you're a nonprofit, you need to be able to fund your ideas, because you don't have really, you're not selling a product, so you don't have like a steady revenue source. Nonprofits operate by securing grants from foundations and things like that. So, so I worked with my mentor to draft this concept paper so that they could then show it to foundations and then secure funding for this project. So that was a big, interesting project. Very new to me. I had never like tried to secure funding apart from like grad school grants, you know, so that was very new to me. And the last thing that I did as part of my residency was writing blog posts. Always a good exercise. I wrote a blog post summarizing the 2022 diplomatic skills pilot course, and then another blog post for fun about why and how scientists should work in diplomacy. So that was my project. If you're interested in diplomacy, let's talk. I love diplomacy. I think it's really interesting to think about the global implications of policy and science. So always willing to connect, and I really wish you the best of luck with your residencies. And thanks again to Leanna for the invite.
That was
also
awesome.
happy to answer questions about my residency if you're curious.
Amazing. Everyone, I see everyone giving up their emoji hands already, so that is great. I have everyone trained super well. And honestly, I'm so happy that you were able to do your residency with Meridian as well. I know that was such a perfect fit for you, so I'm glad to see that it worked out. And you managed to do so much with them in those short 6 months too. It's really impressive. All right, now that our emojis have faded away, I want everyone to give one more final round of applause to both of our residency speakers. Those two were great. Get to see such a wide range of things that are possible after completing this program. So I hope that that inspires you all to seek out some exciting new residency opportunities as you start to think of this phase of your careers. All right, so now we're going to do a pretty significant gear shift. So get ready for the whiplash. Now it's competition time. So I want to start by first talking about our most recent class of bootcamp completers who will again gradually begin their internships over the next year or so. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, the bootcamp is a 6-week experience where 15 early career scientists come together for a crash course in policy writing and pitching. So in addition to some individual professional development, such as developing that policy brief that Lauren showed on her slide, networking with science policy professionals, and creating a science policy focused CV, the spring 2023 crew was given a brand new challenge that has never been given to our SciPol scholars before. So during the very first week of the boot camp, I divided them all up into groups of 3, and these were groups of people that have never worked together before, and honestly, most of them never even met each other before. And from the get-go, they were tasked with developing a tech policy pitch on a topic of mutual interest, which is a pretty challenging thing to do, especially if you're new to science policy. So over the last 6 weeks, they've learned how to craft problem statements, assess policy alternatives, analyze their stakeholders, and condense all of that information into 3 to 5 minute long presentations. So tonight, that's what we're going to be watching. We're going to be watching each group deliver those presentations that they've worked together to develop. And these presentations are going to come with a fun little twist. So we are joined tonight by 2 wonderful science policy experts, Chanel Matney and Patricia Gruber, and they will be giving live feedback on each group's pitches. If you've ever seen the show Shark Tank, that's kind of what we're going for here, but in a bit more of a friendly way, because we're all beginners here, and that's just how we operate. After all 5 groups have given their presentations and all the judging has occurred, we will be selecting 2 groups to be crowned the 2 best policy pitches. One will be based on the judges voting, and one will be based on the audience voting. So with that in mind, as you're sitting down and watching everyone's policy pitches tonight, keep in mind which one is your favorite, because you will get the chance to vote on your favorite one tonight when the time comes. In order to keep things moving on schedule tonight, I asked that if the general audience has any questions geared for any of the groups, to please do so in the chat. And then a representative of one of the group members can answer your question in the chat there. With that, I think we're ready to move on to our first group. So if someone from our first group can let me know who's going to be sharing the slides in the chat, I'll give you sharing access, but I'll start by introducing them really quickly. So first up, our first team is Team WATBA, which stands for What a Time to Be Alive. I bet you guys didn't think I'd be sharing your names publicly. And that team is made up of Desmond, Anastasia, and Miranda.
Thank you, Lana. I'll be sharing the slides.
Wonderful. Let me grant you that access. Oh. I promise I know how to use technology. There you go. Take it away.
Okay. Hi. Good evening. I'm Miranda. I'm a data scientist at Microsoft in the security org.
And I'm Anastasia Burnett. I'm a data scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory.
And I'm Desmond Cole. I'm a PhD candidate at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine.
And our project proposal today is geared towards Representative Kelmer, who is the head of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, which is the funnel through which FOIA amendments usually pass through. So that's why we've decided to target him. And our policy proposal is access to action, amending the FOIA to promote citizens' data rights. So currently there's a lot of problems with the way FOIA requests, this is the Freedom of Information Act requests, are handled. Mostly that the methods are really slow, they're inefficient, some pretty manual, and they don't really scale. So last year alone, there were almost 1 million FOIA requests across all government agencies, and a third of those were left unprocessed by the end of the year. On average, it takes 38 days to get information from a request back. And actually the longest one processed in 2022 was actually in process for 12 years. So there's a big issue with turnaround. We also spent about $500 million processing these requests, and that doesn't even include litigation costs. And in the last decade, we've seen a huge increase in partial or total denials of information from requests, which means that citizens don't really know what data they're allowed to request and which ones are kept secret for security reasons or privacy reasons. And in 2022, there were already legislators pushing for more prompt handling of FOIA requests. And the need for transparency through the Freedom of Information Act, which is our main venue for understanding how the government is using data and data about government processes, is going to increase as AI-based decisions grow in all sectors, including in the government, and citizens deserve to know how data is being collected and used. And so we have a few policy recommendations to handle those problems.
Right, so again, not only is the FOIA backlogged and improperly denying requests, but even in terms of authorization and permissions, the FOIA does not require agencies to conduct research, analyze their data, or even answer questions arising from requests. And as scientists, this is shocking because when we have data, we analyze it. We seek to understand it and drive evidence-based decision-making. And so again, we think the House Oversight and Accountability Committee should write a bill to amend the FOIA. And this amendment would include authorizing the DOJ to provide a web-based portal where data collectors display users' digital footprint in an accessible and efficient manner. This is key for access for citizens, but citizens must also be given the tools they need to act on the information they see. So the FOIA needs to be updated to allow requesters to initiate audits to ensure compliance with all these rapidly changing tech regulations and laws, as well as permit redress mechanisms that will collectively address harms linked to automated systems. It's kind of like a class action for digital rights. So we correct problems and compensate those harms. And to get to the finish line to protect digital rights, the investment into all this would not be an unprecedented cost to the federal government. I would think of it at being at or below efforts going on right now to, for example, build the National Artificial Intelligence Research Program, which its first year, it's projected at $150 million less than the $544 million FOA processing cost. And of course, this update is long overdue.
And these policy recommendations, centered around amending the FOIA, offer an innovative approach to securing citizens' digital rights and democratizing data access. By enabling citizen-conducted audits, introducing a standardized format for data provision, and offering a web-based service for data interaction, this policy will promote transparency, enhance individual autonomy over personal data, and transform the way citizens engage with and are informed about their digital footprint. In this era of data proliferation, these amendments are crucial in shaping a more equitable, informed, and data-empowered society. Thank you.
Wonderful, amazing work, you guys. I'm gonna pass it along to your first judge of the evening, Chanel.
Hello, great job. I'm really excited to be here. Thank Liliana, that was really impressive presentation, and I really liked the one-pager. I'll start with some questions first and then give some feedback. Putting aside cost, why might a detractor oppose this policy? Just one main opposition point, and then what would your response be to that?
I can take this one. I think one thing is that there are currently 9 different sorts of exemptions that you can have for FOIA data requests. And so a detractor might say that if we are kind of automating these systems, we might be more susceptible to like security incidents. But I also feel that having those standardized in a digital way will also diminish the amount of, change between who's processing the request. So if like one manual worker for the Department of Justice is doing it versus another, they might accidentally miss a rule, rather than if we have those systems digitized and the rulemaking in a systematic way, then we can, one, catch the accidents faster and also prevent them from happening just because of differences in personal opinion.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so for feedback, wow, that was really succinct and clear and concise. It's also very technical, but I think you guys did a good job of laying it out. I think because I'm not a data person, perhaps sometimes the language around portals and it was a little bit abstract for me. Of course, I recognize though that your stakeholder is head of the committee and would have familiarity with this language. That being said, though, if you're talking to a stakeholder who has a vested interest, but maybe isn't as much of a technical expert in the language, a way to get around that perhaps would be to highlight like a flagship use case and kind of walk them through it. Here's what happens to a FOIA request now, and this is the process, and it's long and arduous, and it may be dropped. And here's what we recommend for that case if our policy were to be enacted. And here how all the various parts would move, and here are all the parties that would be responsible. I had a hard time visualizing. I understood the problem. I had a hard time visualizing, like in action, what the solution would be. But I think that's just because I'm not familiar with data portals and data access. I think that was one. I think the other was your one pager was really, really beautiful. And when you're in person, that's great. You can hand that off. I think if you're ever in a digital environment like this, folks may be tempted to try to find where you are in your speech on the page. And so I found myself caught between wanting to listen and wanting to read. One way to get around that is to take your one pager and split it into horizontal stripes, like a PowerPoint essentially. And then when you're switching from point to point, you can then move through the different slices of your one pager. That way we're synchronized. And then the one pager can really be amplifying your message as opposed to me. I found myself a little bit distracted because I really wanted to read it, but then I couldn't read it and listen at the same time. But otherwise, I mean, I think you guys were really crisp and clean. That was a very good presentation. It was on time, so good job.
Thanks so much. Patricia.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that Chanel said. I also found myself reading and trying to pay attention to the presentation at the same time. So I think, you know, her suggestions were definitely, would definitely be a good step. Something that this presentation made me think of is Jennifer Palka's new book, Recoding America. And she stood up like the digital service within the US federal government. And so this made me think of that. And it also made me think of a podcast I just listened to with her talking to Ezra Klein about how, you know, like there might be several layers to why this is happening the way it is, and why, you know, it's taking so long. And I wonder if this, like these amendments or policy changes would affect at every single level, you know, the changes that actually need to happen. So I wonder if there's, without like going too far into the weeds with a stakeholder, trying to pinpoint what, you know, if there might again be those multiple layers of bureaucracy that you might need to pinpoint as you kind of drill down into the solution, if that makes sense. That's just something I thought of. And was one of your suggestions, just trying to, you know, think of your presentation, to stand up a website, a new website with the DOJ? My only, again, thinking about Jennifer Palka's book and how she, you know, she kind of came in to rescue healthcare.gov, just thinking about like how bad the US government is at standing up a new website. So if there's a way to do it, and I don't know if there's like a different way to approach this, but just that's something else I could see, you know, happening, or, you know, being a concern, like standing up a whole new website. And the difference between the national like AI research, or I forget what it was called, that agency, and then this, you know, proposal, I don't think that people in government see this as much of a, you know, necessary action to take, whereas they see AI as like, oh my God, we have to deal with this now. We're gonna end up like we did with social media and be completely, you know, trying to catch up. So I think that that's something that, you know, could also, maybe if you just reframe that part, because I think AI is top of mind for everyone, especially with, you know, what's going on with generative AI. And maybe freedom of information requests aren't top of mind for everyone. So just trying to think about maybe another piece that would be, you know, more in line with the level at which you're targeting of like attention that things are getting right now.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. All right, everyone give a round of applause to our first group. It's always hard to be the first group to go, so kudos to you all. And I'm going to move on to introducing our second group, team name Pizza Bagel Steaks, otherwise known as Team Pizza Bagels and Cheesesteaks, or simply PBS. And they are made up of the team of Ebony, Kathleen, and Emily. So if one of you can let me know who needs, oh, you already have screen sharing access, so I will pass it along to you.
Great, thank you. So for our pitch that is addressing the issue of increased cognitive decline that's associated with air pollutants, our intended audience would be Congresspeople, specifically those on the Environmental and Public Works Senate Committee. And my name is Kathleen, and my colleagues are Ebony and Emily. Shown here are our credentials and also our specializations. So between us, you can see we have extensive experience in neuroscience, public health and epidemiology, sociology, environmental studies, and sustainability. And we're all current graduate students pursuing advanced degrees and are also science policy scholars with the National Science Policy Network. Today, we're proposing a solution to an issue that was quite literally right in front of many of our eyes last week. So smoke from an outbreak of wildfires in Canada had spread south and polluted the air throughout the northeastern United States, which, shout out to our name, Pizza Bagel Cheesesteaks, is also where all of us are from. And this is significant because research at the intersection of environmental science and neuroscience is starting to reveal that various air polluting particulates are being linked to early onset dementia and related cognitive decline. And although estimates vary, experts predict that over 9 million Americans over the age of 65 could have dementia by 2030. And this is a staggering number itself, but it doesn't even account for potential increases in cases from earlier onset dementia patients that are being associated with these air pollutants.
So our policy proposal is an amendment to the Clean Air Act that targets specifically cognitive decline. The Clean Air Act is a comprehensive federal law that empowers the Environmental Protection Agency to set limits on air pollutants and regulate emissions from stationary and mobile sources. And what our amendment would do is provide funding for research in linking air pollutants to cognitive decline, as well as develop clean air technology to reduce emissions linked to cognitive decline. So why does this need to happen? There are obvious health implications where long-term exposure to pollutants such as particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide worsens cognitive functions over time through inflammation and oxidative stress, as well as brain cell degeneration. This has economic implications as the financial impact of dementia care is substantial. Estimated economic cost of dementia in the US for 2020 is $305 billion, with individual costs reaching up to $400,000, and by 2050, it's projected to have a total cost nearing $1.5 trillion annually for the US. And lastly, there's equity reasons for this, as certain groups face a heightened risk of this problem. Those who have high proximity to pollution sources, urban residents, the elderly population, and socioeconomically disadvantaged communities.
So how will this be carried out? So carrying out this proposed amendment will involve a collaborative effort between the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Institutes of Health. So the NIH will play a vital role in research and development activities, otherwise known as R&D, related to the measurement of pollution levels. And here we're going to be focusing on pollutants linked to early onset dementia. R&D efforts would also explore innovative technologies that would enable more accurate and efficient monitoring of air pollution levels, and would also help in identifying those high-risk areas and implementing targeted pollution control measures. Finally, it would also focus on advancements in neurotechnology to enhance the detection and diagnosis of dementia at earlier stages, so there would be timely interventions and improved patient outcomes. So what is the outcome? The outcome is that there would be a better tracking system for understanding the link between air pollution and early onset dementia. By generating more data on this connection, we would be able to gain deeper insights to the specific pollutants and mechanisms involved. With improved understanding, we can identify pollutants and develop effective mitigation strategies to reduce the impact of air pollution on cognitive health, and would ultimately lower the chances of early onset dementia and improve overall brain health in individuals exposed to air pollution. And that is all that we have for everyone. Thank you so much for listening.
Wonderful. Great work, you guys. We're going to pass it to Patricia first this time.
Yeah, that was really great. I think I don't remember now if you put it in the slide deck, but I did have a question about. I obviously you're focused on neuroscience in your own careers, but I was wondering, is there an angle for lung health as well? And just thinking about like the stats that we saw with the air pollution last week, like. Being outside is equivalent to like 35 cigarettes, smoking 35 cigarettes. Is that something that you could have also included in the presentation, just to like make a stronger case, like why we need to be tracking these pollutants and like thinking about ways to mitigate? I feel like the more you stress like the horrible you know, consequences of air pollution, the more likely you are to get, you know, something like this funded. So, you know, life expectancy will decrease by this many years. And, you know, obviously cognitive decline is a huge issue, but I definitely think like focusing on the other aspects of health, and even like, you know, how it affects like children, because you know, everyone, especially like policymakers, care about, they don't want to be seen as like not caring about kids. So just like thinking about how you could maybe broaden like, you know, some of the harms that you mentioned, I think would be useful just in getting buy-in. But otherwise, I think it was a really good presentation. And, you know, the visuals with the smoke over Manhattan and DC were very good in, you know, painting a portrait of how bad this and serious this problem is. So I think that was good.
Awesome. Thanks, Patricia. Chanel.
I agree with Patricia's feedback. That was insightful. I agree about going big and thinking expansive. You know, clean air is a fundamental human right. And I imagine you could have a graphic of like a cartoon, you know, body, and here are the effects on the brain and the lungs and the guts. And, you know, this is what happens in children and the elderly and how it's this really multimodal, multidimensional problem. But of course, when your expertise is in neuro, mine is in neuro too, it totally is natural that you would start in your domain. And it's through experiences like this that you can learn about opportunities to build bigger coalitions. So that's a really good point. I really liked the flow of the presentation. I was able to clearly follow everything. I knew exactly what you were asking. One thing though that I was thinking, I was like, well, if we already have the EPA, you know, Clean Air Acts, then aren't we doing enough already? Like, I was wanting to know more what gap exactly we were going to fill. I'm going to pop in a link in the chat. I just happen to know from the work that I currently do that in NIH, there's the National Institute of Neurological Disorders, and they have sort of a relatively new office that's looking at the intersection of neuroscience and toxicology and the environment and the microbiome and behavior. So I was thinking about that. And I was wondering, oh, isn't there sort of a partnership existing? So one thing to consider is to do a quick landscape overview of here are big efforts that are already happening, but it's not enough. You know, here's where there's a gap, and here's how my amendment is going to fill that gap. And perhaps then that's where you bring in like the neuroscience specific focus, is to say this is our gap. Another thing that maybe would make it relevant to be neuroscience specific is you mentioned linking, understanding linkages between certain pollutants that are known or thought to lead to cognitive decline. And I was wondering, oh, which pollutants are those? Is there's something in the air that hurts the brain maybe more than other systems? And so that was a question. So I guess if I were to sort of zoom out 30,000 feet on my commentary, I really liked how you guys went through the who we are, why we're here, this is what we want, this is why you should care. And it was those nice categories of like equity and, you know, something else and something else. And here's what's going to happen if our, you know, if our policy is enacted. So I was following all of that. And so really great. I think where I would maybe strengthen it would be maybe to consider shifting the order, which is who we are, here's the problem, here's why you care, there's a super big deal, you know, think big, air, fundamental human rights. Here's what's already happening, but it's not enough. Here's the gap. And then here's our solution to fill the gap. So it's kind of like getting your audience like totally on board. They're really excited. You show them a problem and they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. This is really bad. We're doing a lot, but it's not enough. Okay, here's where our puzzle piece comes to fit in. I think maybe the puzzle piece that was missing for me was figuring out where this amendment fits in the giant landscape of air regulatory things that are already happening, and how would this not be duplicative. So I think that would be my biggest point of feedback for you guys. But otherwise, I really liked the visuals. I liked how you guys the turns, the transitions were really smooth. I had a lot of clarity about what you wanted. I think maybe a bit more detail in certain areas would have been helpful. But I think if this were like a real policy pitch, those details I think you guys would hash out in a follow-on conversation, which I really hope that stakeholder would invite you to have.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Everyone give it up. All right, next in line is Team ARG, which stands for this group's team member initials. but in my neuroscience nerdy brain, I have secretly been referring to them internally as Team Autoradiography, even though that's not what they call themselves. This team is made up of Alwyn, Ruby, and Gianna. And with that, I will have you all take it away.
Okay, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So yes, hi, my name is Alvin, and with my colleagues Gianna and Ruby, we are science policy fellows with very diverse backgrounds in natural science, urban science, and also psychology. We're also very excited about AI opportunities and are actively using tools like ChatGPT and so on. But more importantly, we are concerned about the digital divide and how accessible these tools are across society in the US. And hence we are addressing our policy memo to the US House of Representatives and the Committee of Science, Space, and Technology.
AI technologies can be prohibitively expensive, creating barriers for individuals and organizations with limited resources. This is further reinforcing inequalities and restricting access to benefits of technology. For example, 87% of American adults use the internet regularly. However, this percentage dropped significantly to 66% among certain underserved communities, such as low-income communities. Additionally, rural residents go online less frequently than their urban counterparts. So what needs to happen? AI needs to be accessible for rural and low-income communities. There needs to be a stronger collaboration between developers and policymakers.
We are proposing that the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology draft regulatory legislation which would expand the availability of AI technology to underserved communities. This legislation would be enforced by the Federal Communications Commissions, the FCC, as they are currently responsible for similar digital equity efforts, such as the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which makes this commission the best equipped to enforce this sort of proposed legislation. Moving on to the main policy goals and why this regulation is necessary. First, to provide distribution justice and bridge the digital divide by investing in broadband and AI infrastructure for underserved communities. Second, to build economic empowerment in these communities by providing equal access to economic opportunities that these communities have previously been denied access to by lack of availability. And finally, providing regulatory action for a very rapidly growing sector and the opportunity to lay the foundation for the US to be a leader in the equitable deployment of AI.
And there's different levels of outcome that we hope to achieve with our policy or policy changes. First of all, obviously increasing the access to the technology itself, creating economic opportunities across the country, both in rural and urban areas, and overall enhancing quality of life, particularly for disadvantaged communities. And ultimately, we think that can also lead to the US leading kind of a solution on this increasingly global problem of AI and accessibility of AI and technology. And with that, thank you for your attention and happy to answer any questions.
Amazing work, you guys. This time we're going to go in the order of Chanel and then Patricia.
Well done. Great job, you guys. I appreciate you guys taking a topic that's so prescient and really top of mind. AI and learning language models and ChatGPT, it's something that is in conversations everywhere in the policy world. And I guess my question before getting into feedback is, imagine that I am a person who doesn't have access to conventional technologies, or I'm unfamiliar with AI. Let's fast forward a few years and your proposal has been executed. How might my life, or me as a representative of the community you're trying to serve, how might my life look different is my question.
I can take this one. So this legislation really aims to address a gap that is very rapidly widening, and we don't know what AI will look like in a couple of years, and really the shift that it'll have on the economy. So this is really preparing these communities and these constituents. We're trying to pretty much bridge a gap and give you more opportunities. So you'll definitely have, these constituents will definitely have more options open to them as opposed to not enacting this sort of regulation.
Okay, awesome. No, thank you. Okay, I think that this is a huge, super complex, very multi-dimensional problem, and it's really big. And I think that there's a lot of, I think there are multiple issues in the problem set. And so perhaps I was considering which one really is the focus of your presentation. One could be, this is a jobs development program. We want to increase AI literacy, how to use AI. Another could be building AI infrastructure, which really is just computer infrastructure, smartphones and, your tablets and laptops and things. Another could be, again, more education, and advocating for programs, in schools and equity at the level of, the ways that we're being familiarized with IT. And so I think perhaps that, and this is a super, super tough problem to talk about. I mean, we're seeing this happening in real time. And so like, you're in the same boat with a lot of other really smart people. So I think my suggestion would be to get really, really specific about which part of the giant apple you really want to bite off. If you're talking about access and the digital divide, that does sound perhaps like economic opportunity that everyone should have. If the smartphone is going to become like a huge deciding factor in the haves and the have-nots, like if you have ChatGPT or Siri on your phone versus if you don't, what does that mean? And maybe that will increasingly represent a divide in class. Perhaps what you're proposing is that we need to make sure that everyone has access to internet and smartphones, and then you can sort of go that way. But it's really big and it's really abstracted. And so I can imagine lots of different solutions to the various, to the problem statement that you mentioned. And so I think by honing down a bit, that would be powerful. Your presentation was beautiful and really sleek. I think this is a challenge lots of people have with the visuals, is that to do more showing instead of telling. I think there was one where it was you were showing the digital divide, or you had some schematic, and then someone mentioned this really powerful statistic. I forget what it was, but it was like, 1 in 5 some things don't have something. And I thought, oh, that would have made a great pie chart, or that's one of those figures where you can have 1 stick figure over here and 5 over here, and it's like, it's very apparent. And so we always want our visuals to really amplify and enhance what we're saying. And that's just a way to kind of really make it pop. And so that just may be an opportunity that you can avail yourselves to next time. But you're right, this is a huge problem. It's going to take a big coalition to solve this issue. And so I appreciate you guys for taking it on. And I think that if you guys were to do like a second draft or a round 2, and really hone in on whatever your core nugget is going to be, that it would be a really strong presentation. Good job. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I agree with Chanel. I think it should really focus on one specific area. So let's say you're focusing on jobs, which was probably the right, I'm thinking might be the right way to go, because there is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which is currently working on deploying broadband across the country. So the infrastructure is kind of on its way to being put in place. The other thing I would do is define AI. What do you mean by AI? AI can mean a lot of things. AI technologies can mean a lot of things. And AI can be very harmful, especially in, low income communities or indigenous communities that currently are part of the digital divide and do not have, broadband access like other, more urbanized parts of the country do. And, same with rural, I can never say this word, parts of the country as well. So, you know, these communities already have a huge distrust in government, and you know, so just I feel like there would be hesitation to like deploy AI like in their communities, for example, because like there are very harmful AI technologies like facial surveillance, like algorithms that can, you know, detect your face and identify you, or, you know, some other types of technologies, and they could be used for like technological surveillance by the government or by the companies who are just trying to like monetize or commodify like human behavior. So just thinking about like the level of distrust that there might be in the communities is something that I would definitely think about. But I think if you're going for like the economic empowerment axis or part of it, and, you know, thinking about the jobs part, like definitely education. So you know, there's coding schools and that out there, but like, how do you widen those programs, or, you know, expand those programs, or how do you, you know, make sure there's maybe like a public awareness campaign about like what AI actually is would be useful, and like, you know, how it's poised to like change kind of everything in society, and, you know, helping people like realize that they need to potentially jump on the bandwagon for, you know, pursuing this as a potential like career or job opportunity or something like that. But yeah, definitely focusing in on what it is within AI that you're talking about, and what the actual like outcome that you're seeking is, would be. And then if you're targeting these, you know, communities, thinking about the distrust that might be there, especially with like surveillance and stuff like that. And I'm happy, I'm writing about this right now. I'm a fellow at New America. So that's probably why I'm like talking a lot about surveillance. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so
Give
much.
a round of applause for our third group. Moving on to group 4, very excited to introduce Team No Rain, No Gain, one of my favorite names of the cohort. And this is made up of team members Abigail, Kira, and Erin. Take it away.
All right, so my name is Erin Caseta, and this is Kira Griswold and Abigail Giles. This policy pitch is directed towards Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. The three of us identified a shared interest in rural healthcare, as we recognize that although our generation is very familiar with and even reliant on digital health tools, there are many communities and populations that do not have the same knowledge or access to effectively use these tools, even things as simple as downloading apps or logging onto websites, including within our own extended families. For example, when my grandmother, who was a lifelong subsistence farmer in rural California, was diagnosed with ALS, she didn't even have internet access, much less the knowledge of how to make doctor's appointments through medical apps.
And just briefly, the reason why we're targeting Senator Casey is because he is a strong advocate for middle and working class, has an invested interest in Pennsylvania's rural communities, and demonstrates dedication for rural equities and vulnerable groups.
The 46 million Americans who live in rural communities, including who live in tribal communities, can't easily and equitably access internet-based healthcare tools, for example, mobile health applications like MyChart or web conferencing like Zoom. Lack of broadband infrastructure in rural communities, poor quality broadband, and a lack of awareness or understanding of digital healthcare tools makes telehealth much more difficult for rural residents to adopt. For example, tasks such as attending a virtual appointment with a healthcare provider or scheduling a vaccination appointment can be challenging for less digitally connected groups.
And this is a problem because it's often more difficult for rural patients to access traditional in-person medical care, which is in part due to the need to travel great distances to reach doctors, a general shortage of rural healthcare providers, and the cost that it takes to implement telehealth and broadband into individual homes. So without access to triage digital health tools, such as medical knowledge databases or messaging systems with providers, many patients aren't able to know when and how specialized care is needed. Without access to telehealth tools, rural Americans forego accessing healthcare, or they seek emergency care for a benign illness, which can increase the burden on healthcare facilities, the costs to patients, as well as risk for advanced illness. And this is especially important because these communities have higher health risks because they include seniors, tribal communities with limited healthcare resources, as well as those with jobs that have high injury risk, which includes things like agriculture and manufacturing, which are prevalent in rural areas. So these disparities are further exacerbated for rural Americans with lower educational and economic resources. Virtual telehealth visits are one solution to address these inequities in rural healthcare, and they provide a cost-effective and accessible alternative to traditional care.
Now, thinking again about the barriers to telehealth, as you're likely aware, there are ongoing efforts to expand broadband infrastructure into rural communities through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And programs have been developed, some through provisions of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, to bridge the gap between providers and rural patients by promoting telehealth in vulnerable communities. However, despite access to the internet, many rural Americans still experience difficulties using digital health tools that are being integrated into modern healthcare due to a lack of familiarity with these tools. Community members still need to be connected to the relevant technology and tools and also trained to use them safely and effectively. And it's also really important that patients can access these tools independently, on demand, and in the privacy of their own homes.
Our recommendation is that Congress appropriate funding for community-based education programs to provide rural residents with practical knowledge and skills about how to use digital health tools appropriately and safely, as well as increase community member access to such tools in conjunction with existing federal programs that are already addressing broadband disparities. We envision this being implemented in conjunction with existing USDA programs by approving additional funds that are earmarked for community-centered education. One such program that could be bolstered with these additional earmarked funds is the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grants Program, which enables the federal government to financially assist rural communities to improve access to telehealth resources in order to bridge the gap to healthcare providers. However, in its current form, it has limited funding designated for individual learning, such as telehealth and video healthcare tool training. This funding would help to leverage existing community members in the healthcare sphere to train at-risk groups on how to best use telehealth software to their advantage. Senator Casey, given your commitment to rural Pennsylvanians and your experience in supporting the nation's vulnerable older adults, we ask that you support the expansion of this USDA program to include community education and additional appropriations to fund this initiative. Overall, we believe that implementing these community-focused policy initiatives would lead to the improvement of technology accessibility for rural residents, such that current advances in digital health tools can be utilized to their greatest efficiency. Providers outside of the area can reach patients with need for specialized care in order to bridge the divide and disparity to healthcare access. This would ultimately improve both health and healthcare institutions in rural communities where this infrastructure is at a disadvantage.
Wonderful. Patricia, you can go first.
That was really good. I loved how it started with like a personal anecdote. I'm also from Pennsylvania. I live in Pennsylvania, and Bob Casey's my senator. So I appreciated the rural Pennsylvania and you know and choosing Bob Casey. I think that was really smart. I have a question about like how the USDA education program works now. Is it just they distribute the funds to, you know, partner organizations in the community, or like who's actually running those programs on the ground?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now it's set up so that hospital systems and healthcare providers are the ones applying for the grants. So it's sort of supporting more of the side of like the healthcare systems and access for providers. But then there's still sort of that gap of, okay, like it's there, can community members actually access and reach it now?
So there would still be a gap for people that haven't connected with a doctor at all, for example. Yeah, so I guess, you know, how could you expand these funds, or you like put into the policy as well the people that are in that gap? Because I feel like that's, you know, probably not a sizable, but, you know, a decent amount of people, especially in the rural communities that you might be trying to target. So just thinking about like how to hit that gap outside of the healthcare system. And, you know, I wonder if there's like an opportunity to maybe like put into this policy something about either partnering with non-healthcare organizations, or even partnering with like municipalities, I don't know, like a library or something, to like also do these kinds of, like, I know a lot of like libraries are doing like digital skills training and stuff like that. So I wonder if this could also be another, you know, place where a local library could step in and you know, be part of this policy. But I thought it was great. You know, as we were going through the kind of steps, I was like, well, we already have the broadband. And then obviously you talked about that. And then I was like, but what we really need is digital skills. At like thinking it, and then you went to that and I was like, okay. So it really like followed what I was thinking as it went through. So I thought it was a great presentation overall. So great job.
I had a similar experience with Patricia as I was listening, going, well, what about that? And the very next sentence was that. And I was like, yes. This was really, really quite excellent. You were very knowledgeable of the details. There was a really great flow. It was crisp and clear. The problem statement was well defined. I really liked singling out a particular senator in a particular state, and you had a great rationale for why. I also appreciated the personal story about the grandmother. You had examples about someone scheduling an appointment or getting vaccinated, and how even in-person appointments can be more difficult. This group is at higher risk because they're farther away from places to get treatment, and they may have jobs that put them, you know, at higher risk of injuries. And so you're really sort of building this up. Then one thing I was curious to know more about, let's see, about the telehealth tools that would be like particularly useful. And so, so what I'm going to mention are sort of just like icing on the cake things to take it from like already being excellent to like, you know, supernova. The one little tidbit that I wanted to know more about was, you mentioned medical knowledge databases, like a place where you can go in, I guess, type in a question and get an answer, and that would be something telehealth, or a chat system with the doctor. You may also talk about portals, like for example, here in California, the Stanford healthcare system, which is where I go, has a patient portal where it's everything from appointments, your prescriptions, your lab results. There's a chat with the doctor. It's all kind of in one thing. And so it'd be cool to have a slide sort of highlighting when we say telehealth, this is exactly what we mean. There's this whole cornucopia of features in telehealth, and these particular things like making an appointment or prescription reminders would be helpful for the population that we're talking about. So let's see. I think overall, maybe the presentation could have more visual polish. When I was really listening to the speech, I was like, wow, this is so good. I want to take these slides and just sort of like really, you know, zhuzh them up and have them amplify the message even more. Let's see. And then towards the end, okay, appropriate funding earmarked for education programs. And then it would partner with, and then you mentioned 2 other programs. Maybe I would have split that into 2. It was kind of a lot to take in. I think maybe it could have been easier for me to absorb, to go, we want funding for tech literacy in the community. And it's like, okay, great. And then here are some existing programs. And then I thought to myself, where's the gap? And your very next sentence was, but here are how those programs are limited. And so I was like, oh, okay, they got it. So you have all of the pieces there, I think, with like relatively minor like zhuzhing and adjustments. I mean, it's really quite excellent. So good job. You really ought to be proud of yourselves.
Amazing. Everyone give up your emoji round of applause. And then we are moving on to last, but certainly not least, our final group of the evening, Team MRJ, which is another initials name, but it doubles as Team Mergers. And this team consists of Min, Rochelle, and Jenny. So I'll let you 3 take it away.
So Rochelle's going to be sharing our slides for us. Fantastic. There we go. Wonderful. Hello, all. We are the Mergers, or the Team MRJ, and we are Jenny, Rochelle, and Min. And we have educational backgrounds in neurotoxicology, chemistry, and biochemistry. And since the pandemic, we have all worked remote jobs and are looking for future jobs that have remote opportunities.
The title of our talk is I Spy Employee Compliance with My AI, and focuses on regulating technologies used by employers to surveil their remote workers. Our target audience is the United States Senator Robert P. Casey Jr., who has previously sponsored the Stop Spying Bosses Act, an act that focuses on generally limiting an employer's surveillance of their workers. We will dive into this topic with a story. A company in China recently developed a smart chair cushion and used them in a product study to monitor their employees' health, including posture and heart rate. The cushions also tracked the time employees spent working at their desks, and this information was then used for employee performance reviews. This is an extreme example, but there are more sinister employee tracking technologies currently being used, and the fact that they do not have to be disclosed to employees is infringing on employee rights to privacy. Currently, there are no regulations in place to limit the monitoring of employees who work remotely. We want to know how we are being monitored and why.
To ensure our privacy is being protected during the remote work, we need the federal government to regulate workplace productivity tracking tools and software. This is especially important to do it now, as more of these productivity tools are being used with the rapidly increasing number of work jobs. Since the pandemic, the number of people working primarily from home tripled from 5.7% to 17.9%. That is approximately 27.6 million people. With the rise of more work from home jobs, companies are also increasingly using the monitoring software to track employee productivity, with an estimated grouping of 96% of the company monitoring their remote employee.
And of those employers, 75% have fired someone due to data collected by these monitoring softwares. These software programs can do anything from monitor your keystrokes, take screenshots, measure your mouse movements, and even turn on your webcams, all without permission or even not your knowledge. And so productivity tools are also on the rise. So we've heard about that pillow that can track posture changes, heart rate, and time spent at the desk. Another is called Remote Desk, which has facial recognition features that can actually track your eye movements and alert an employer whether you are eating or drinking if your company prohibits it.
The rapid adoption of the surveillance technology lacks of regulation, leading to the potential inequity and privacy concerns. This is especially true for individuals without dedicated workspaces, those who have children or caretakers and require accommodation for disability. Additionally, the use of artificial intelligence in monitoring software poses the risk of perpetuating bias of their creator, resulting in more people not being treated equally by monitoring software. The problem is that only expected to be worsened as more jobs offer remote and work from home opportunity.
And so the US government is currently missing crucial legislation to protect workers' privacy in remote work. And this is in direct opposition to what the American public wants, with 61% of US adults saying they oppose AI tracking workers' movements while they work, according to a December 2022 survey carried out by the Pew Research Center. We also know that the Biden administration cares about this issue, calling the use of this technology an increasingly common serious risks to workers. In fact, the White House convened a listening session just a few weeks ago to hear from workers, researchers, and labor rights leaders on how these automated technologies are affecting their lives.
We urge United States Senator Robert P. Casey Jr. to propose a bill that regulates monitoring technologies, AI-assisted productivity tools, and algorithms used by employers to monitor and terminate employees. The bill should also require employers to inform workers about all monitoring tools being used on them. We envision this bill will be structured similarly to the Workplace Technology Accountability Act, which was introduced but unfortunately dropped in California in April of 2022, which includes the requirement that employers disclose how, when, and why they are monitoring their employees, prohibit some types of monitoring, such as monitoring off-duty and on personal devices, and ban the use of AI tools as the sole indicator of whether an employee is disciplined or fired.
The end result of the sponsored bill and drafted legislation on the mandatory workplace monitoring notices is to protect the worker rights to privacy, prevent discrimination and inequity, and increasing the awareness of employee monitoring practices in the United States. Thank you so much for considering our policy. We're happy to answer with any question.
Wonderful work, guys. We're going to start with Chanel this time.
Wow. As a 100% remote worker, like mildly freaking out right now. So you did a great job, I think, of activating your audience to really care. I mean, that first anecdote about the chair cushion, I was like, oh my God. So yeah, no, like I was all in, like really listening with bended ear. So given that you have a captive audience, because again, this is a really pressing issue and you're talking to a champion, there may have been a missed opportunity, I think, to be even more specific about your policy recommendations. Because if your senator is someone who champions in this domain and you're asking him to propose a bill that, like, he probably is going to propose a bill like in this world. And so maybe you could, I guess, try to leave your fingerprint, leave your coalition's DNA in it by stipulating, like, just even in more detail or even more precisely, like what your group would really like to see. Because like what right now, I think your proposal is great for sort of like more general audience, like this is why you should care and we should have laws that, you know, sort of protect against monitoring and we should inform employees. He's already totally on board. Like you have to imagine that he's like, you know, in his office, he has aides, you know, drafting things right now. So then he's going to be thinking about, yeah, I get it, but like execution, like if we're going to be, if California's bill didn't work, why? Like what killed it? And sort of what should we be thinking about to help it survive? Often big initiatives like this, you kind of have to start small and, you know, do something very achievable, low-hanging fruit. Like what's a specific thing that could be low-hanging fruit? Like I think we would all agree that people shouldn't be able to turn on your webcam or your microphone without your consent. Like, is that something you really, really want to see in there? I'm getting so excited because I'm just like, oh my God, somebody do something. And so yes, I think that for a general audience, like I would have very few comments, but if you're talking to a champion or someone that's made this their advocacy issue, one of the benefits of that is you can go in and ask for more and be specific, and you can talk more about, you know, like here's how I think it should play out. Here, you know, you might even start at if it was in California, you could even say we're going to go back to California and try again, or what have you. Gosh, that's really exciting. So yeah, no, great job. Do I have any other comments? Oh, also on the visuals, there was one point where you were stating what you wanted the bill to do, and I would have loved to have seen that typed out as you were speaking. A few slides later, it was policy proposal in 3 bullets, and I said, oh gosh, where was that like 30 seconds ago? And so for your big sort of thematic points, it's helpful to have a visual guide so I can read along. Really, really great job, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you know, what Chanel said so far. I would also, so I would I don't know if any of you know who Shoshana Zuboff is. She wrote she's basically this woman who came up with this concept of surveillance capitalism. So when you're going through this presentation, all I could think about was these tech companies are already doing a lot of this. Like, yeah, maybe they can't like access your camera or anything, but this is already happening on like a consumer level. And there have been multiple attempts for a federal privacy legislation. The closest one was the American Data Protection or Data Privacy Act. And it, you know, it made it through the House committee finally, July 2022, and that's it. That's where it ended. So I think, you know, maybe thinking about piggybacking off of these state initiatives in the meantime would be a better solution. You know, obviously the California one failed, but there are multiple other states that have privacy legislation that you could piggyback off of to do like this worker tracking legislation. Like Massachusetts, for example, would be a good place to start. They're, you know, a very liberal state and they already have privacy legislation. So I would think maybe about doing this at the state level first before going to the federal level, because there is no sweeping federal privacy legislation. And as much as, you know, like workers' rights are something that everyone cares about, I think, you know, just thinking about the American population as a whole, or, you know, children online, you know, we can't even get that through Congress right now. So like, how are you going to get them to focus on, you know, workers? So I think, you know, if it were to come where you see like, oh, well, the Children's, you know, Online Act gets passed, I forget what it's called. And then like a federal privacy bill gets passed, and like I would piggyback this onto it. But in the meantime, I would just focus on states, because I think this could be a longer way off. And then, you know, again, just thinking about like, this is happening like outside of work, you know, when you're on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So just thinking about how like these multinational tech companies are already operating in a surveillance fashion, and thinking about ways to like target those, you know, as part of the broader picture would be something as well, like a data protection act, like similar to, it doesn't even have to, so privacy and data protection, people like conflate the two, but they're actually very different. Data protection is normally around like a set of values. So if you look at GDPR in the EU, it's around like the right to erasure or right to be forgotten. And so like looking at obviously a lot of other nations have come up with similar legislation, but privacy is different than data protection. So, you know, data protection means no one can like steal your data and, you know, whatnot, but privacy is, you know, thinking about like an individual's like private life. So just thinking about, should we have actually a data protection law, or should we have a privacy law? Because those again are different things. So yeah, and I would definitely suggest looking at Shoshana Zuboff. You're gonna go down a rabbit hole if you do. She's a great scholar in this, but I think that she would be a good place to look in terms of like thinking about like how you might tackle this as like a wider problem. Because it's, you know, I know obviously we want to like drill down, but like I'm just hesitant just thinking about like the tech legislation that keeps getting stuck, like if this is the best solution for workers' rights.
I'd like to mention one more thing if I can. There's some interest in the chat, and I do have interest as well about what happened with the California bill. I used to work in the California state legislature. And so what you could do if you were interested in carrying on this conversation is find out, like, I don't know what year, you know, this bill was attempted, or if there's a similar bill being moved right now. And so you could find that out. And if there is, you can call the committee that currently has the bill, or call the office that's carrying the bill, and you can talk to that staffer, even just to say, hey, you know, I'm a policy student that's interested in this topic. Like, who can I talk to learn more about what's going on? I'll put a link in the chat. I think it's like calinfo.leg, but all bills that make it to a certain stage have a formal bill analysis that's written for them. So I bet you could go and find the formal committee consultant analysis that was written for that bill. Often people will submit letters of support and of opposition. And so if this is this is very much a live issue that's ongoing. My experience with the California legislature is that they don't have maybe as much gatekeeping for like an interested citizen to get information or to call or to talk to someone. And so that's a kind of a fun way to get involved at the source. But yeah, who knows? There could be a hearing, you know, coming up. There's ways to participate online and to say, I vote yay or I vote nay on this bill. So if there is activity on this happening in California, you could potentially learn a lot. If it's kind of a big issue bill, which it sounds like it is, there's likely a lobby group or two that's really spearheading it, and they may have contributed a lot of language. So you could talk to the lead, you know, sort of, when I say lobby, I mean lobby advocate, you know, to the lead person to sort of see, you know, what's going on, and then offer yourself as a resource to say, hey, maybe I can be someone that could be a knowledgeable subject matter expert on the topic, or I can bring my coalition, we're a show of force. So just a potential opportunity there for you guys in California.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about like organizations that are working on this, I would suggest the Electronic Privacy Information Center. They might be a good organization to check out.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone give it up for our fifth and final group. And now we're going to move on to, this was all fun, but now we're going to move on to the fun voting part. So judges, if you haven't yet emailed your rubrics to me, please do so I can compile those scores. But I also want to open the floor up to audience voting as well. So I'm going to be pasting a voting ballot link into the chat. So everyone here, minus the 2 judges, is eligible to vote. Your vote will be anonymous. So once you click that ballot, you'll be able to vote for your favorite pitch, and the one with the most votes will win our audience voting prize. So in the spirit of instant gratification, I'm going to turn off my sound and video for about 10 minutes or so. I'm going to compile everything, and then we'll come back then to announce who the winners are. So I hope that most of you are able to stick around for a little bit to see who the winners are, and we'll be back soon. Okay, so we're going to start by announcing the audience choice winner. Very close vote, only 1 vote separated the winner from second place here. Very, very close. But I'm happy to share that the audience's choice winner goes to Group 5, the Mergers, which was the team of Min, Jenny, and Rochelle. Congratulations. And then the judge's choice winner, so this reflects the team that scored highest according to our judges' rubrics. These rubrics are out of 20 points. And apparently my cat wants to share the word on who the winner is. But with an average score of 19 out of 20, our judge's choice winner goes to Group 4, No Rain, No Gain, which was the team of Abigail, Kira, and Erin. Everyone give it up for their team. Amazing work, and amazing work to all of you guys for coming together and putting together such amazing pitches. And with that, I am super happy to conclude tonight's SciPol Scholars Day festivities. I wanted to give one final thank you to the many people that made this thing possible. I first want to thank our first 2 speakers of the night, Emily and Lauren, for telling us about the residency experience. Of course, I need to thank our amazing, wonderful judges, Chanel and Patricia, for being wonderful judges and providing such valuable feedback to everyone. It was incredible. Of course, I want to thank our audience for participating in the voting process. You made it very interesting and making me nervous that we might have to have a runoff. So thank you to everyone for participating and actually making sure that there was a difference in the scoring. And I finally just want to congratulate our Spring 2023 scholars for successfully completing this program and for delivering amazing pitches tonight. I'm super excited to see what you all accomplished through this program and beyond that. So again, that concludes tonight's festivities. If you're interested in learning more about the program and want to participate in the future, check out our website at scipolnetwork.org/SPSR. And otherwise, thank you all and have a great evening.